Prepare to have your health questions answered here on Safe, Effective Natural Solutions with Dr. Todd Binkley, owner of Binkley Healing Center in downtown Ventura. Now, here's Dr. Todd.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley, board-certified doctor of Non-force Chiropractic and practitioner of functional medicine. Most of the time I talk about functional medicine for metabolic issues like rheumatoid arthritis or diabetes or heart disease or high cholesterol or most recently Alzheimer's. But last week I switched and started talking about neuropathies. Neuropathies are basically damage to nerves, impingement on nerves from nutrient deficiencies, diseases like diabetes, and impingement from conditions like pressure on nerves that cause sciatica. So last week we talked a little bit about the causes of diabetic neuropathy. So liver disease can also cause diabetic neuropathy, mainly though because it causes deficiencies, and especially vitamin B12. So alcoholics, people with hepatitis, people with fatty liver disease, and people with diabetes, almost anything that damages the liver will cause a deficiency, can cause at least, and often causes a deficiency of vitamin B12. And this is so important to know about because it's easy to fix. It's very difficult to fix those diseases, but it's easy to fix the deficiency. You can just take a vitamin B12 supplement, but don't buy a vitamin B12 supplement from Costco or whenever you buy a vitamin B12 supplement. Check the label. You want to make sure that it says methylcobalamin. Methyl, M-E-T-H-Y-L, cobalamin. This is the active form of B12. It's essential for healing, repairing nerves throughout your body, and 99.99999% of B12 supplements on the shelves in stores are cyanocobalamin. Cyanocobalamin is the precursor. It's cheap. That's why it's so common. But methylcobalamin only costs maybe 15 or 20% more. It's not expensive. $20. You can buy a bottle of methylcobalamin 3 months worth, 2 or 3 months worth for $20. So don't buy cheap B12. Get methylcobalamin to heal your nerves. Pyridoxine, vitamin B6 is also an important overlooked nutrient for deficiency, often because of liver disease, but also just from crappy food, people not eating. Vegetarians in particular, vegetarianism is a good idea, or at least eating less meat is a good idea. Eating vegetables is a good idea. I'm always perplexed or sort of conflicted when I talk about vegans and vegetarians because it's a really good idea to not kill animals, and it's a really good idea to not eat too much protein from really horrifically produced farms that produce most of the meat we eat. But we need protein, and that's the conflict. And so eggs are an excellent source of protein. I personally eat mostly chicken and fish, and some of the chicken and fish, I imagine, is probably produced and slaughtered in horrific ways as well. So no insult to the vegans and vegetarians out there, but every vegan and vegetarian I've ever tested shows up on blood tests functionally deficient in B vitamins, especially B12, folate, B6, and others, because, our bodies usually get these things from animal protein. So make sure, the only way to know for sure is to get tested. Restless leg syndrome is another common condition that people experience and have no idea what's causing it, and they often get no relief when they go to most doctors, and it's often a combination of tight muscles and B vitamin deficiency. So this is what we're talking about, the causes of damage to nerves, neuropathies, damage to nerves, pressure on the nerves, which in the legs and lower down to the feet usually occurs in the hips, and nutrient deficiencies from things like inadequate B12, folate, B6, calcium, magnesium, and a host of others. So last week I talked about a young teenager who had a severe muscle spasm that was severely impacting her life because she couldn't do the cheerleading that she wanted to do anymore, but it was also painful even to sit or walk or do her homework. And she had a dramatic recovery just from releasing the tension on that muscle. So I had another man, he was in his early 50s, and he fell off a 57-foot cliff. He had borrowed a wheelbarrow from a neighbor and was dumping some rocks that he had been digging up in his backyard, and his backyard happened to back up to a riverbed, and he was throwing these rocks over the riverbed, and it was dusk, and he was tired, and he just had one more load to dump, and in his effort to dump this load, the wheelbarrow started to slip over the edge of the cliff, and he tried to yank it back, and in the process, the wheelbarrow yanked him over the cliff, and he fell 57 feet onto a rocky bottom riverbed. It's lucky he lived because he broke, I think, 9 bones in his body or more, and he was in the hospital. And he had to have back surgery, and they wanted to fuse 5 of his vertebrae together. He basically flexed forward like closing a knife, and crushed a vertebra in his spine. And I did some research and found a surgeon that would only fuse 3 vertebrae. He had to have a vertebral fusion because one of his vertebrae was completely disintegrated by this fall, and so obviously they have to rebuild something and connect it to a vertebra above and below. But instead of infusing 5 vertebrae, I helped him find a surgeon that would only fuse 3 vertebrae. But before that, long before that happened, he's in the hospital, and he's had multiple procedures, and he's in his room, and when I got there after he called me in, there's a sign on the door that says, "Do not touch the patient or the patient's bed." And when you walk in, there's another sign on the bed that says, "Do not touch anything." And this is a tough guy. He was strong, he was fit, but because of the surgeries he'd had to repair all the broken bones, somebody nicked a nerve. That was their diagnosis. Somebody nicked a nerve that ran down to his leg, and so he had this collar around his big toe, kind of like the collars that they put around a dog if they've had any kind of procedure where they don't want the dog to lick and disrupt the procedure. He had this white plastic collar around his foot, and another sign there saying, "Don't touch," because this was a tough man. He could take pain, but for whatever reason, because of this nicked nerve, if you touched the railing on his bed or even came close to touching his foot, he would scream in pain and jump off of the bed even though he was in agony to try to defend himself. It sounds like hyperbole, but I've never seen somebody in this much pain and such a specific spot with these particular situations. So he called me in because he knew that I did unusual things. This was years ago. And I came in and I said, "I'm not going to touch your toe. I've got a pretty good idea that would hurt. But what about if I touch your opposite foot? Would that be okay?" And I started probing around and checking his opposite foot in the same area as the foot that was in pain. And I said, "Does it hurt a little bit here? If I pinch, if I push there, does it hurt a little bit there?" Our brains are designed to regulate pain receptors by perceiving dangers and threats. So his left foot was in such a heightened state of alert that breathing on his foot would cause him to scream out in pain. And again, I want to stress, this was not a sensitive man. He was a pretty tough guy. And so I said, "Can I press on your other foot?" He said, "Yeah, sure, go for it." And I checked out and I said, "Right, so is this the spot on the other foot that hurts. And I pushed on whatever part of his foot. I don't remember. It was a while ago. And he said, yeah. And I said, is it a little tender here? He says, yeah. And I held that part of his foot. This is non-force. This is an example of non-force chiropractic. Chiropractic means done by hand. Anything you do by hand to relieve pain is non-force chiropractic. So I'm holding his opposite, I think it was his big toe, some part of his foot. I'm pretty sure it was his big toe. And I'm just holding this spot and saying, is it a little tender here? He said, yeah. And I held it for a while, and I said, okay, after a period of time, is it not tender now? And I said, yeah. And I said, how does your other foot feel? The one that he wanted to kill people for even breathing on. And he said, oh my God, how did you do that? The pain in his opposite foot was about 50% less. I came back the following day, did the same process again. Then the pain was almost gone. I came back a third day, and it was completely gone. So the point is, the surgeon didn't nick a nerve when he had his surgery. It just irritated a nerve that caused the brain to become super hypersensitive to something that it perceived was a threat. And I, by sending different signals to the brain from the opposite side, the brain always compares the one side to the other and the front to the back. This goes on behind the scenes and you don't even know it. Your brain is constantly deciding whether or not you need to be in pain for that bump on your shoulder or that whenever you stubbed your toe, the pain goes away. Anytime you've ever experienced pain that went away, that was the result of your brain checking in, comparing one side with the other, front to back, to see if there's really any threat there. Does the pain need to be on a heightened state of alert forever, or can we let that go? And so I helped his brain realize that it wasn't necessary for him to have pain on that other foot. There was no damaged tissue that needed to be protected while it was healing. It was just an overreaction. And so once his brain realized that, it changed the sensitivity. It re-regulated the sensitivity in those nerves, and his experience of that was the pain disappeared. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley. You're listening to Safe, Effective, Natural Solutions to Almost Any Health Challenge. This week we're talking about neuropathies. Neuro means nerve. Pathy means disease or damage. So anything that can put pressure on or cause damage to a nerve is what we're going to be talking about today. I've previously discussed damage from diabetes, liver disease, nutrient deficiency, and pressure on nerves. We've just talked about a patient who fell off a cliff and his doctors thought he had a nicked nerve from the extensive surgeries that he had to undergo after breaking several bones throughout his body from falling off a 57-foot cliff. But there are several other things that can cause damage to nerves. Surgery, again, is another good example. I had a 65-year-old woman who had liposuction. And the surgery was a success, but the patient couldn't lift her foot up. Her whole left leg was numb, and she couldn't lift her. She was dragging her left foot, and the doctor thought, we might have nicked a nerve. That's a phrase you don't want to hear. But he assured her that it would go away in time. It would just been a small insult, and it would heal on its own. Well, that time that he predicted passed, and it was not healed, and she came to see me, and I checked for tightness in her hip rotators, tension in her spine. This is the thing. If you have any kind of nerve symptoms are classically, you have pain. It happens in the upper body too. We're kind of focusing on the lower extremities today. But you have pain in your butt, in your back of your leg, front of your leg, in your calves, in your feet, in your low back, basically anywhere in your body, but we're kind of focusing on the lower extremities today. If you have pain in these regions that's not explained by any injury that you had, you didn't have a trauma, you didn't fall, you didn't break anything, you didn't have a car accident, just you have these pains that persist and are probably been there for a while and are getting worse, and no one else been able to help you with these? Well, these are symptoms of pressure on a nerve or damage to a nerve from inability to heal and repair that nerve tissue from lack of nutrients. So I specialize, and I've helped thousands of people deal with both sides of this, removing the pressure from the nerve and identifying the nutrient deficiencies so that you can consume them and fix the deficiency. And it's really inexpensive to fix these deficiencies. It's usually B vitamins, vitamin B12, proper forms and adequate amounts of vitamin B12. So don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, I'm taking Centrum Silver and it says there's B12 in there. No, don't do that. You need to have testing done, proper diagnosis, and identify the amounts of, if you're taking a multivitamin, and if it's a 1-a-day multivitamin, it's not providing adequate amounts to heal any disease. 1-a-day multivitamins are useless. The good multivitamins that provide adequate nutrients to prevent disease are almost always 3 or 4 capsules a day. And even more importantly, even if you're taking one of those, if you have a severe nutrient deficiency that's causing a neuropathy, then even if you're taking an excellent multivitamin, you may need to take a significant higher amount of some B vitamins, like methylcobalamin, vitamin B, the proper absorbable form of vitamin B12, B6 in the P5P form, the form that your body actually uses, and methylfolate, the active form of folic acid. And there's several other things that are important to consider if you have damage to or pressure on your nerves, creating nerve symptoms. So here's another case. I had a woman who came to me who had liposuction. I think she was about 65, late 60s, had liposuction. Surgery was a success. She looked a lot better. She felt a lot better, and certainly, hopefully, liposuction is not a first-line therapy for most people, but she was she was eating well. It's important to be sensitive to people with this issue because she was severely overweight, but she was otherwise fit, healthy. She was eating an excellent diet. She had an organic veggie garden in her backyard, and she was just struggling. She could not lose the weight, and she was well off, and so she had the surgery. And she, I think she reduced her body weight by 60 pounds or something like that. But then she came into me because she had foot drop, her left foot. She couldn't properly, she was, limping, not limping, but it was hard for her to walk properly because her left foot would catch. She had foot drop. She couldn't lift her left foot. Well, that's nerve damage. She had some nerve damage because of the surgery. That's what she blamed it on. And I said, well, let's see. So it is often the case that when you do surgery, it can nick nerves, and they mostly ignore this because they're focused on the procedure they're doing and preventing blood loss. There's much higher priorities. And it is true that a lot of times little tiny branches of nerves that are cut during surgery will easily regenerate themselves. So when she complained to her surgeon that, her foot was dropping, she was dragging her foot, he told her that, it would eventually heal itself in a certain amount of time. Well, that time passed and it didn't heal itself. So she came in to see me and I examined her, and she had tremendous tension in these same hip rotator muscles that I've been talking about before that impinge on the sciatic nerve. Well, that didn't change when she had her surgery. So, whatever happened during the surgery caused some kind of irritation. But that's not the only thing. That's not necessarily determinative of what her symptoms have to be. The point is there's always other options. When something suddenly starts hurting you and you know that something happened recently that probably caused it, and especially if you're worried that, oh my God, no one can fix that, well, that's not often the case because several things contribute to your symptoms. Most of you myself, everyone, we're all walking around, accidents waiting to happen. We all spend times in chairs, in cars, looking at screens and computers all day. Muscles get tight. We're accidents waiting to happen. So if something like this surgical procedure, this woman that had the liposuction done, maybe, that procedure caused a problem. But the bottom line is she came into me, identified patterns of tension and muscles in her hips that were ridiculously tight, and no one had ever checked that on her before. And I released those patterns of tension, and in a very brief period of time, this was a few years ago, I don't know, it might have been 2 or 3 months. Her doctor told her it would take a certain amount of time for those nerves to heal. It didn't, and after 2 or 3 months, we got her back to where she was completely feeling totally back to normal. To recap, if you or someone you know has burning, tingling, numbness, or unexplained pain in your buttock, leg, front of your leg, back of your leg, upper, lower leg, or foot, that's probably some kind of pressure or damage to a nerve caused by pressure on the nerve in the hips or nutrient deficiency, such as folate and B12, B6 deficiencies, which are super easy and inexpensive to fix. Most doctors never look for these things, unfortunately, and most doctors never look for the most common causes of impingement on nerves in the hips, the piriformis muscles and other hip rotators in your hips. Disc herniations cause neuropathies as well, diabetes, etc. These are common, but if you've already ruled those things out, then there are other options. So let me know if someone you love needs assistance with this. I'd love to be able to help them. I've helped thousands of people with similar situations that were told there was nothing they could do. And it's just not true. There's almost always something that can be done, especially if you haven't done the proper testing that most doctors don't do. So disc herniations are important. Anytime somebody comes into me with a neuropathy, pain, nerve, numbness, burning, tingling going down their legs especially, or their arms, I'll try to cover the upper extremities in another episode. I've covered some of this before in previous episodes, but if you have a bulge in a disc or anything in your spine that can, arthritis is another example that can press on your nerves, then you can experience some of these same symptoms. So we always have to consider the big picture. Several things can cause pressure on your nerves: numbness, burning, tingling, radiating pain. These are very confusing things, but the very fact that it's difficult to identify what the problem is almost guarantees that it is pressure on or damage to a nerve from some kind of injury or nutrient deficiency that can often be reversed. So whether you have neuropathy from diabetes, from liver disease, from nutrient deficiencies that you probably don't even know about, or pressure on nerves from sciatica, or plantar fasciitis. Plantar fasciitis, I could do a whole show just on this. Plantar fasciitis, the plantar is the bottom of the foot. The plantar means the bottom of the foot, where you plant your foot when you walk. And fasciitis means inflammation of the fascia on the bottom of your foot. This is a really common condition that is also just horribly inadequately treated by most doctors. If the bottom of your feet hurt, it is probably because of tension in muscles, but also because of things that can irritate your nerves. So please, if you know anyone who has plantar fasciitis, have them shoot me a text or an email. I've been getting a lot of texts and emails about neuropathies and other nerve conditions, and that's why I did this show, and I'm happy to answer your questions. I'm Dr. Todd Binkley. You've been listening to Safe, Effective, Natural Solutions to Almost Any Health Challenge. Please tune in next Friday right here on KDAR 98.3 FM.
You've been listening to Safe, Effective, Natural Solutions with Dr. Todd Binkley. If you have a health question you want discussed on the show, email your health questions to Dr. Binkley at BinkleyHealingCenter.com. Take advantage of this opportunity to ask questions for yourself and for your loved ones, because our health matters. Join him next Friday at 4 p.m. for safe, effective natural solutions, right here on 98.3 The Word, KDAR.